Real Women, Real Life. We are so excited to have you for episode 2. And look, we changed locations. Isn't it such a pretty setting out here? We're so excited to be able to have you again to listen in to our podcast. And today's topic is going to be navigating healthcare with a disability. It's quite a heavy topic. There's a lot of challenges that we face as individuals with disabilities trying to get the healthcare benefits and needs that we personally need to have to be able to navigate life. And so we figured we'd share a little bit of our stories with you today. Right, Angie?
Right. And since we're doing that, Sarah, how about you talk a little bit, because I know that your major in college was healthcare administration. So what was it that led you to want to go into that direction?
Yeah, absolutely. So I did. I decided to go into healthcare. It didn't start that way. I wanted to be a mathematics teacher for a long time, but decided kids and that just wasn't my thing. So we skipped over that major and changed our major a couple times. But we did end in healthcare. And so I have a bachelor's degree in healthcare administration. And the reason why I chose it was, one, because I had a desire to be a doctor, but I physically couldn't be a doctor. I just can't use my hands, and I don't have the dexterity to do all of the procedures that a doctor could typically do. But I still wanted to be able to impact the healthcare system. And so having a degree in healthcare administration made it really easy to learn policies, learn procedures, learn laws, all of those things that impact us, and then try and figure out how to navigate that path so that we can start changing the policies to better help future generations of people with disabilities. So that's kind of how I got started in the healthcare field.
But not just people with disabilities, people in general, right?
This is true. I mean, there's a lot of things that really need to change, as we all know, with the healthcare system. And so it just kind of gave me that in to really understand how the system works, since it's such a difficult system in itself.
Yeah, so how does that change the way that you navigate as a person with a disability in the healthcare environment?
I think it gives me a different level of respect for the doctors that take care of us, understanding what their level of education is, the background of what they learn when they're in medical school, and then coming out and having to navigate a world full of all these unknowns. It just kind of helps me understand what the background looks like. So I work in HR, and so I hire doctors and nurses right now that go into the field, and they impact people's lives every single day. And so working in that background has really helped me understand, the complications that they go through, the trials and the successes and failures that they have to face, but they still continue to save lives. And so I think that's what's most important.
Okay, so with that all said, which is amazing, I think it's a very awesome thing to have that background in your back pocket as a person with a disability when it comes to advocating for yourself and those things. But I'm sure you didn't plan it out that way, but I think that it's probably been a good thing for you to have regardless.
Right.
But what's the different, how is your perspective different as a patient? Like, so you have that knowledge, right? But then now you're going into the doctor as a patient. Mm-hmm. And so I'm wondering, does that change your perspective on the healthcare environment as a whole at all, or?
A little bit. I think the best thing for me, because I've learned with my disability, I'm kind of like a foreign car, and nobody really knows enough about me to do any type of procedure. And so I've just really learned that I need to know what my needs are with my disability. Mm-hmm. And then I need to be able to voice them to the doctor. The doctor is still a very knowledgeable person, right? And They go through a lot of education, which is something we do have to respect. But they're not going to know every single disability or how my disability affects me personally when it affects each one of us so differently. And so just being able to speak up for myself is really important to me.
Right. And I think that that's one of the ways that we can really have our voice heard in the healthcare environment, is just to educate ourselves about our disability, right, and also just be aware of what helps you and what doesn't help you, and how your body responds to different things, because as we all know, every disability is on a spectrum. So what helps you with arthrogryposis may not help the next person with arthrogryposis.
Right.
So you have to have, but you also have to have a good relationship with your doctor to be able to have that open conversation, I think. And sometimes, unfortunately, though, I've also found that doctors aren't educated about disabilities when they are going through medical school.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I think, one, there's a lot of disabilities to be educated about, but I don't even think it's touched on enough through medical school to have them have that open mind when somebody like myself or somebody like you walks into a doctor's office.
Right.
They don't think as openly as I would hope they would. And so when you find that doctor that's amazing and understands your needs, you're like, please don't ever leave. I need you for the rest of my life.
Right.
Because you just get it. Right? And I think that's the most important part.
I think just helping them to see you as a person over and above the disability, but also things like being able to navigate through their medical environment, like being able to get in and out of a doctor's office, being able to get on, weigh yourself. We can't even weigh ourselves at doctor's offices. Yeah. I mean, all kinds of, do you offer interpreting, or do the doctors know that it's their responsibility to pay for interpreters for people who are deaf or hard of hearing, those kind of things. So, and do you know that the doctors can actually have certain things paid for because there's, they have, examination tables that lower and they raise up and stuff, so that transferring independently and stuff like that is available to individuals. And lots of times doctors assume that you have to bring somebody with you, and that's not necessarily the case.
Yeah, because bringing somebody with you, like we discussed before we started today, it doesn't always give you the privacy you need, right? How many people do you really want to know what's going on in your life? I mean, I would take a caregiver with me.
Yeah.
But there's some news that maybe you don't want to share right away.
Yeah.
Right?
Like, you need to process it on your own. There's nothing wrong with having a caregiver. All I'm saying is that should be your choice,
right?
Not something that you're obligated to do because they say they can't lift you, right, or whatever. So my point is, if we need to get it where people are more educated about how to lift, or if we need to, whatever it is we need to do, then we as people with disabilities need to learn how to tell our doctor what we need and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think one of the biggest challenges, and it sounds funny because it's the first thing that happens when you walk into a doctor's office, is the desk for the doctor's office is like 10 feet above my head. And I never understand how a person is supposed to be able to check in, regardless if they're in a wheelchair or not, if you can't even reach the top of the desk. It's little things like that that just kind of make you wonder, how would I have signed in if my wheelchair didn't have an elevator lift on it? Because I can't even reach the table. And are they well enough and understand disabilities or, in general, limitations enough that they would come outside around the desk to help me check in if I didn't have a caregiver with me?
Right. Or I've had my mom with me, and they speak over me to the person that's with me as if I'm 2 years old, and we as people with disabilities have this experience all the time.
Yeah.
But I just think that, especially in the healthcare environment, those kind of sensitivity training things need to happen regardless. And I feel like in the healthcare environment, doctors are trained for when people are in traumatic situations, like teaching them how to get used to being in wheelchairs and whatever, but they're not trained about, so we have some of us have medical issues over and above our disabilities. Like, we have higher levels of heart disease, we have higher levels of lots of things because we physically cannot access a doctor in the same way to get screenings done. Right. Mammograms, stuff like that, are just not as accessible to us because a lot of us can't physically get up to the machinery,
right,
which is why physical accessibility is so important. But not just that, but also, how do you, people with autism, people with developmental disabilities, how do doctors break the information down in such a way that those individuals are able to understand and feel accepted in their environment,
right,
as well?
Because it's still important to talk to the patient. The patient's the one getting the care and receiving the treatment, and unfortunately, if you're talking to the person with them, you already have excluded them from the entire conversation, and that's their independence, being able to take care of themselves. So you're almost taking their right to independence away, depending on how you look at it.
Right, exactly.
So I thought about something while you were talking about machines. Short story, was recently at the dentist not too long ago, and the dentist upgraded to this amazing x-ray machine where it circles your head. well, that's all cool, but my wheelchair is in the way. So I got stuck in the x-ray machine because it circled my head and whacked my wheelchair and almost took my shoulder with it.
Oh my god, ow.
Because you have to stand in the machine.
Well, so you weren't able to use your elevator and do...
I could use the elevator, but the backrest of my wheelchair was as high as my shoulders.
Oh,
so it didn't pass.
Okay, so it didn't work.
Right. Mm-hmm. So even though I figured out a solution, which was laying the back of the chair down and then holding myself up so that I could be circled by this new fancy machine, what about the next person that can't do that?
Right.
So it's not just me, but you have to think about everybody else who needs that access. And teeth, of all things in healthcare, is a very important sign of different diseases that are going on in your body. So if you can't fully have your examination done, you may miss something.
Right, exactly.
And so I think that's one of the main parts of access in healthcare is that we get skipped.
Yeah, like people don't think about us as far as maintenance. We have to wait till things become an emergency situation because we don't have insurance or we don't have access to the machines, and so like by the time we go see the doctor, it's like from 0 to 100.
Right. Exactly.
I got to do something and I got to do it now.
Exactly.
Kind of thing.
Exactly. What's one of the most difficult healthcare experiences you've had thus far?
I think that, well, there's a couple different ones, but I think I want to share one that was very simple to address. Not too terribly long ago, the last time I went to an OBGYN, I had to obviously I already know I'm in a wheelchair, and I scheduled the appointment months in advance. And when I scheduled the appointment, they knew because the receptionist saw that I was in a wheelchair, right? And so I make the appointment, and 2 months go by, and they call, and they're like, well, it's time for your appointment, blah, blah, blah. And then so I get up to the window, and I said something like, do you have an accessible table here? Because I'm going to have to transfer on my own.
Right.
And they're like, no, not at this location. Now, here's my point in saying that. Something very simple as saying you'll have to go, like the receptionist could have told me, look, we're going to have to schedule your appointment at this particular location because they have an accessible table there. Just having that kind of communication with me and letting me know would have saved me time and stress in that situation. So it all comes back to communication, because it is the person with the disability's responsibility to be straight up with you. Let you know that they're hearing impaired or what their particular needs are so that you can handle it as the doctor. However, it's also your responsibility to kind of pick up on some of that too, I feel.
No, I definitely agree. And it's a two-way street, right? It's a relational thing. You have to be able to communicate what your office can offer and when it can offer it. And then we also have to be able to communicate the needs that we have and the accommodations we need to be able to successfully have our visit complete. And we could talk about doctor's offices all day long, but I think for me, my most difficult healthcare experience thus far has just been getting the medical equipment I need. Because as a person with a disability, I need a lot of different medical equipment. I don't use a lot of high-tech things, but my wheelchair is my biggest piece of medical equipment, and it's something I need. It's literally your legs. All of our viewers out there that can walk around, my 6 wheels, because now I have a tractor trailer size wheelchair instead of a regular car size wheelchair. My 6 wheels are my legs, and without them, I literally can't move, right?
Right.
And so navigating healthcare on the durable medical equipment side is also a challenge.
Right, exactly.
Because for a person like me who was born with a disability, I've been in a wheelchair since the age of 4, and I've never been able to walk. This past year, I tried to get a new wheelchair as an adult because, remember, it's easier to get things when you're a kid.
Yeah.
It's a lot harder when you become an adult and you need some type of medical equipment. It took almost 2 years to get a wheelchair because I was deemed not disabled enough for a wheelchair, and yet I've had one since I was 4.
How about, didn't they tell you could use a walker?
They did.
I'm sorry. I just think that's hilarious. I'm like, have you seen her?
They did. I did. 10 denials, and I think 6 of them said you can use a walker. Like, no, I can't. I don't even know how I would use a walker. I'd have to figure out how to sit on it and hope there's wheels on it. I don't know.
Wow. When she first told me that, I was like, what? Have they seen you? Do you need to take a picture of yourself and send it in?
I thought about going straight to the healthcare office and being like, here I
am! Give
Can't
me a walker! Show me how I can use a walker.
But it is a struggle, and it's really frustrating, and the fight is long and agonizing. And so I'm lucky enough to have the support system and the friends and family to push me to consistently fight. But what happens when there's a person that doesn't have all that?
Yes, and doesn't know how to use their voice. I mean, is not used to speaking up and whatever. Because everybody's opinion counts. Everybody has that inner voice, and they know when stuff is wrong. But when you don't know there's a right and a wrong way to advocate for yourself, guys. And you have to really, for me personally, I like to educate first. I mean, I would much prefer to educate and help them have a better understanding for the next person, because it's my opinion that I go through and I know Sarah's like this too because we've talked about it before, but I go through everything not just for me but to learn something so that I can help the next person go through the obstacle or help them find a way around that helps them to have their dignity as much as possible. And the thing is that if the doctors came to us and said, how would you address this? How could we make it better? We would be more than willing to sit and have a conversation with them. I mean, there's a group that both Sarah and I are involved in right now that is a part of our local Center for Independent Living. Not that I'm plugging that, but we are starting to get into a situation where we can create an environment where we can have these kind of conversations. So the doctors are aware of what's going on, and so that we can help them to become more educated.
Right. And it wasn't my doctor in this situation. My doctor is amazing. He had written, 500 medical notes, talked to the medical doctor at the health insurance company to fight for this wheelchair. I mean, when I say it was a team of advocates, it's a team of advocates. Yeah. It's myself, it's my doctor, it's the company that provides the wheelchair, and we all have to work together to advocate for what we need. So once we got approved for the chair, then we get denied for all the extras that come on the chair, which are deemed a luxury, right? So I can't be tall to reach my cabinets, to reach light switches, to open doors, to do any of those things with the elevator on my chair because, well, that's a luxury.
Yeah.
So that got denied.
Mm-hmm. Or your Jaco arm.
Or the robotic arm.
That you're about to get. That, because I don't know if y'all noticed, but Sarah can't clap her hands. I'm kidding. And those of you that have watched the channel have seen it. But anyways, so Sarah's trying to explain what the arm is. So I'm sorry.
Okay, wait. Just so you know, one robotic arm is not going to be able to clap hands for me either. I need 2 robotic arms to clap my hands. Let's just set the story straight.
Okay, sorry.
So I'll be fine not clapping my hands. Anyway.
I'm kidding. It was just there. I'm sorry.
It was really funny. So yes, I'm still working to get a robotic arm. The robotic arm is amazing. It attaches to my wheelchair. The wheelchair joystick that I use to operate the chair actually operates the arm. And it just gives me such a sense of, like, the independence I've never had. Like, I got to trial the arm and was able to get myself a glass of water for the first time. I'm 27 years old and cannot get myself a glass of water. Do you know what it feels like to be able to do that for the first time? Like, that is, like, an out-of-this-world experience. And so this arm can provide so much more independence for me. And yet, it's a luxury again. Yeah. And so I've been denied, I don't know, maybe 15 times now. Now I'm going to court. I have to go to trial. And I have to explain my case to the entire insurance company because they still think that it's something that I don't need. It's just something that I want.
And like, let me just say, you were mentioning the lifter. I guess that's what you called it. But I just got one on my chair, which I had to pay for independently. I chose to. And let me tell you, I had such a visceral, like, guttural experience. You were saying about crying. I had such an experience when I was able to raise up and talk with someone eye to eye. Mm-hmm. Like, you don't understand how much of an effect that has on your self-esteem until you're able to look at someone eye to eye and have them know that they're listening to you. Not about you, not around you. They are listening to you in that moment.
Exactly. And they don't have to bend down. When a person has to bend down to talk to somebody in a wheelchair, it gives them power, and it gives us no power. And so they change their tone of their voice. And so they start talking to you like you're a cute little kid, and oh my God. And you're like, no! Like, I need to be able to stand up so that I can have a full conversation with you as an adult. And so it's just these devices that consistently need to come into our lives to give us more independence as we get older, right? That need to then show that health insurance companies really need to understand. I mean, who in the health insurance company currently right now has a physical disability that actually looks through these accounts and says, oh, I know exactly how she feels. Yes, approved.
Right, exactly.
No, there's nobody like that. These are all people who are able-bodied, who are looking out for money, who want to make sure that the health insurance company makes the right amount of money and doesn't spend too much money on anything that isn't technically necessary in their eyes.
Right. And I just want to break it down into a human issue, okay? Because everybody, because we have people in our audience that have both disabilities and without disabilities. And I want you guys to understand that for us, it's just about becoming human. It's about leveling the playing field. It's not about asking for something special. It's about not having to ask for assistance. It's about not having to feel like you're making somebody go out of their way to help you, or you're not creating a barrier for them in a situation. Because there's a lot of times, I'm just sharing with you from the perspective of someone who has lived with a disability all of their life. There's a lot of times when you think every situation out based on who's going to interact with you and how uncomfortable you're going to make them feel. So anytime you can take back that control and that independence, that means somebody else doesn't have to do that for you or be that for you or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. It takes a lot to navigate any system. Obviously, the healthcare system is just one that has posed a lot of challenges for us personally, and that's why I wanted to bring the topic to light in this episode. But what's really important is to understand that every person has some types of limitations, right? There's things that just not all of us can do. It doesn't matter if you have a disability or not, but it's about speaking up for yourself. We want to make sure that you understand that however you communicate for what you need, and that's the most important part. So before we wrap up here, because I think we've talked a little bit about each side of healthcare, what's one thing that you wish to see changed in healthcare in the near future?
I would say just willingness to communicate, willingness to see. But you know what? I want doctors to be trained differently. I would like to see people be. I know they can't be exposed to every single disability when they're being educated. I understand that, but I'd like for them to be exposed to some, so that they don't. It's not like we get to be their first experience. Yeah. When it's an emergency situation. That's would be my hope, is that we create an environment we can assist medical schools, or we can find a way to start that conversation. Or we can help doctors to find resources like different write-offs and stuff to make sure that different equipment is affordable for them in their offices, and make them see that it's actually just good business to be accessible.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think the biggest thing for me is an accessible doctor's office. I don't want to go into an examination room and get my wheelchair stuck between the stool, the counter, the examination table, and the chair in there for your guests at the same time, because I can hit all 4 of them if I make a circle. That's how small some of the rooms are. And so the understanding of just creating an accessible atmosphere within a doctor's office would not just help people like us with disabilities, it would help everybody. It's just there's too much equipment, or if the equipment's too tall, or if the desks out front are way above our heads, just accommodating. Having a push button on a door, you never know what mom with a stroller can't hold the door and push the stroller in at the same time. Let's add a push button, then everybody can access the door at the same time. So it's all these simple little accommodations that we can really add that would help the entire community. And I think just explaining that to the doctors and really having them understand that they can make such a bigger impact and make their office more welcoming could really change the community's outlook on visiting the doctor.
And not everybody, like, I just want to say that not every exam room has to be accessible.
Right.
But at least having one that would be accessible, that you could actually see someone, or at least knowing what locations you have accessible exam rooms in, and having that conversation like I was talking about earlier, just being able to have that kind of conversation with people would be so much better than what we have going on right now.
Yeah, absolutely. So we want to thank you for joining in with us today on the topic of healthcare. If you have any feedback on your healthcare experiences or any types of connections you have within the community where we can actually start working together to advocate for these changes, we would definitely love to make that connection with you. And so we will close out today by saying, the future is inclusion. Thanks so much, guys. Bye.